G'day guys, Ian from Cookie's Critters here, and today we are talking about why you should not own a bearded dragon. Now guys, if you are new to this channel, please do us a favour, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on those post notifications. Now guys, let's get started. Okay guys, now before you go back and rewind to the start, yes, the intro was right. This is a video about why you should not own a bearded dragon as a reptile pet. Now, if you can get to the end of this video and you can say to yourself honestly, well look, everything that Ian's raised, I can manage the cost, the upkeep, the health, the feeding, all those kind of things, and there's no concerns, then these guys are an ideal pet, and especially a reptile pet. There is a reason why they are the most popular kept reptile in the world. Okay guys, so the first thing that we want to talk about today is a bearded dragon's life expectancy. Now, beardies are known to live between 10 and 15 years in captivity, but there are always the exception to the rule where a bearded dragon can live longer than 15 years. Now that being said, 15 years is a long time and it is a long commitment. Any animal that you purchase should be considered and thought of before you do purchase, rather than just being an impulse buy. These guys are not disposable animals. Please, when you buy a reptile, you buy a bearded dragon, it is for its life, okay? So it does mean that all the care, all the feeding, all the husbandry, all the cleaning, everything needs to be maintained and upheld for the full life of your little beardie. Now, while we're talking about life expectancy, we might as well talk about medical expenses and health care for a bearded dragon. A bearded dragon, like any reptile, like any animal, does require medical attention when they become ill or when they become injured. Now, this does mean a visit down to your local veterinarian. Now, not all veterinarians do specialise in reptiles, so I do recommend that you do find someone before an injury or before an illness does take place. But it's better to be prepared than to be underprepared. Now, certain things that you're going to have to take your beardie to the vet for will be things like fecal tests to check for parasites and worms and stuff like that, respiratory infections, and most commonly would be like injuries, so tails and toes and stuff like that. Now, these visits are typically not expensive. In Australia, here in Sydney, typically I look at about $80 for a reptile consultation. Antibiotics after a fecal screening if required, you could be looking at about $16, $20, maybe even $30 for the fecal and the antibiotics associated with parasites. Now, if injections are required, you may need to pay a little bit more, but it all depends on the illness and the treatment involved. Now, while we are talking about treatment, yes, that does mean that you are going to need to administer antibiotics, whether that be orally or whether that be in the form of an injection. Now, either way, whether it's oral or injection kind of antibiotics, your reptile veterinarian should be able to show you how to administer the first dose before your little beardie leaves their clinic. Now, that being said, when you take your animal home, it will be your responsibility and your responsibility alone to maintain those injections, maintain the oral dosing throughout the course that is prescribed by the veterinarian. Now, I will be posting a video shortly on how to do an injection for a bearded dragon and how to administer oral antibiotics. And these things are really simple to do. There's nothing to be concerned about. But when we have done that, the video link will be up above. So the next thing that we want to discuss is a bearded dragon's temperament. Now, little Christian here, he's about 1.5 years old, and as you can see, he's very calm, he's very relaxed. He's more than happy just to sit on my shoulder and chill out while I do these videos. Now, that being said, you're going to be buying a brand new hatchling, a little baby beardie, and potentially it may not be so relaxed. You've got to take into consideration that this little bearded dragon is itty bitty. It's tiny compared to us. We are huge compared to them, and obviously that is going to invoke a bit of fear, a bit of distress to the baby beardie. Now, any good reptile breeder or any good pet store should give you the recommendation up front before you buy it, before you bring the beardie home, that they do have an acclimation period. It's about 10 days to 2 weeks where the bearded dragon is going to be potentially stressed and potentially off its food and have a lower appetite. Now, during this time, I always recommend to my customers to not handle the beardie during those first 2 weeks. Allow them to settle, allow them to get used to the sights, the smells, the sounds, their enclosure, their environment, the routines. Get them comfortably eating before you handle them. Now, in terms of handling, this is a big concern, right? So you've given your beardie 2 weeks, maybe even more, to settle in. You go to pick up your little beardie, and it's opening up its mouth, like it's showing a sign of aggression. Now, so this opening of the mouth, the act of aggression, right? It's not because they are aggressive and they want to bite you. It's a defense mechanism. They are fearful. They feel like they are being preyed upon, they're being threatened, and their natural reaction is to look big and tough and scary. They'll puff their belly out. They'll flare their beard out. They'll open their mouth up nice and wide, and they'll give you a warning to stay the hell away. If you persist with this and you don't pick up your bearded dragon out of fear of being bitten, then potentially you are rewarding this behavior. Now, I don't condone picking up an animal and stressing them out, but there has to be a set balance between getting them comfortable with human interaction and them feeling safe. Now, in my time keeping and breeding bearded dragons, I've only been bitten once by a beardie, and that was a little baby bearded dragon. Now, this little guy got its finger caught in the glass tracks, the runner for the glass. So my only option was to slide the glass door open, which obviously was going to invoke a bit of pain for this bearded dragon. And when I've gone to pick him up, he's gone for a bit of a bite. But that was a pain response, not a aggression response. So guys, these are things that you need to consider. Am I going to be patient with my beardie, give them the time to settle in, and then am I going to be patient with them to train them? You would train your cat, you'd train your dog to be, house trained and, on the potty or, whatever else. Like, there's certain things that we do for other animals. We need to give the same considerations for bearded dragons. Now, later on in this series, I will do a video on how to handle a bearded dragon that is showing these aggressive displays and how to get them to calm down and become more comfortable. Okay, so we've gone through their life expectancy, we've gone through medical costs, we've gone through the fact that you're going to have to possibly give injections or oral antibiotics, we've gone through behavior, and now we've just gone through potentially biting. Now, obviously any animal that has a mouth, has teeth, can bite. So, these are things that we need to consider. So the next thing that we want to talk about is the costs associated with keeping and raising a bearded dragon. Now, there are 2 costs associated, and by that I mean there are direct costs, the ones that you see daily, physically there and then there are the indirect costs. So the first cost that we're going to talk about is their enclosure. So you're buying their enclosure, you're buying your dragon at the point of sale, and a pet store or a breeder tell you that you need to buy this little enclosure, and you end up buying, let's call it a 60 centimeter enclosure. Now, obviously that's an inappropriate enclosure size for a bearded dragon. We do recommend 1.2 meter floor space by 60 centimeters tall. Obviously, if you buy a small one, then you're going to have to upgrade in the future when your beardie is about 12 months old. So our recommendation is to always start with a lifetime enclosure, that 1.2, or for the imperial minded out there, 4-foot enclosures. Now, obviously, these are considerations that you need to make. Am I going to be able to house a 4-foot enclosure, a 1.2 meter long enclosure, in my lounge room, in my bedroom, wherever it is that you want to keep your bearded dragon? If you can't keep an enclosure that size, maybe you shouldn't be owning a bearded dragon. Okay, so you have the space and you got the money to buy the appropriate sized enclosure. Now, the flip side to this is, which way do you go? Do you go glass or do you go melamine? Now, our preference here is always a melamine enclosure, not because we build them, but once you've had glass, you know the upkeep and the effort it is to heat a glass enclosure. Okay, so you've now picked whether you go glass or melamine. Now the thing is the direct cost associated with fitting out that enclosure appropriately. Now, bearded dragons need heat, therefore you need a basking light. So you'll go and buy yourself a basking light, whether you buy one that's a Reptile brand through a pet store, and they'll probably sting you between sort of $18 and $25, or whether you go to a hardware store and just buy a clear spotlight. Either way, you're going to end up having to buy a physical globe there and then. That is a direct purchase, a direct cost. Now, throughout the course of your bearded dragon's life, even throughout the course of 12 months, you will have to end up replacing that globe when it does eventually stop working. Now, other globes to consider are your UV source. Now, bearded dragons do need a high output of UVB. I have done a video on bearded dragons UVB, and essentially you've got two choices. You can either go for the little compact spiral type, or you can go for the long T5 fluorescent tubes. Now, these are costs. You've got the hardware cost, the fixing, and then you've actually got the globe. Now, the cost of the globe doesn't stop there. Now, these guys, they can illuminate an enclosure for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but just because the light is on doesn't mean it's still providing adequate UVB. Now, if you go the cheap option of the compact screw, and especially if it's been imported from overseas, a little eBay cheapie, then potentially the UV output isn't going to be that strong at the offset, and therefore it's going to diminish its capacity and its availability to produce UVB. That being said, a cheap globe, may be cheap upfront, but the replacement cost to give your bearded dragon the appropriate amount of UVB may be increased, because you may have to buy 4, 5, 6 of the compact screw types in 12 months, as opposed to one of the long T5 tubes. So while we're talking about lighting and heating here, I'll just flick over to the flip side, which are the indirect costs. Now, obviously, to power up a light globe, you do need electricity. Now, depending on which enclosure you've chosen, glass or melamine, a glass enclosure, you'll probably find that you've got a 150 watt basking light. You may have to supplement with a 150 watt ceramic heat emitter, and then you've got your potentially a 39 watt T5 UVB. Now, all up, you're looking around about 300, 350 watts of power per hour. Now, when you multiply that by the 12-hour, 14-hour day cycle that you're providing your bearded dragon, these are your actual running costs. Now, if you do have a thermostat that is attached to your enclosure, and that is switching and powering your light globes, that will also drain electricity and increase your power bill. You could be looking anywhere between $3 and $4 a day for your running cost if you go glass. Now, obviously, if you go for the melamine enclosures, for our melamines, we typically run a 40 watt heat globe. During summer, during sort of spring and autumn, when it starts getting a bit cooler, we do up to about 75 watts. But we don't need to bolster it and give us ceramic. We don't need to go to all that effort having those high output lights. We've got one 40 watt, and then we've got one of the 39 watt T5s. Therefore, we're looking at 80 watts of power as opposed to 300, 350 watts for the glass enclosure. That means that our running cost is significantly reduced, and we can have more reptiles, more bearded dragons, requiring less outlay. Now, coming back to the direct costs, obviously you've got to feed your bearded dragon. Any mouth you have in the house needs to have food go in it. Now, as a baby, a bearded dragon will eat a significant amount of small insects. Now, this is crucial for their growth and their development. If you withhold food, then it would just stunt their growth, and you'll end up with a small dragon, and a dragon that does have health issues later in its life. Now, we've done videos on feeding bearded dragons. We know that a hatchling should be fed at least twice a day, possibly even 3 times a day if you can manage it. And they can eat anywhere between sort of 15 and 30 bugs, even up to 40 bugs per feed. Now, we do recommend wood roaches, and there are varied reasons for that: the nutritional benefits, the reduced risk of injury. Crickets do nibble on dragons when they're sleeping, so woodies are safer. There are other reasons, and the main reason is that we can actually breed our own wood roaches here and have our own breeding colonies to sustain the volume of feeder insects that we use here at Cookie's Critters. So yes, talking about breeding colonies and feeding insects, it comes across to the icky side, and this is where a lot of people have a personal issue. So whether or not it's just a natural aversion to touching bugs, just being icky and gross, or whether or not it's just your personal mindset where you have a problem with feeding live insects to an animal to sustain their growth. Now, bearded dragons, they like live animals. They like to hunt and they like to chase. If you were to try and feed them dry bugs or frozen bugs, they're not potentially going to be interested. They'll probably eat around it and just have the salad. Obviously you can wear gloves, you can do all these kind of things, but if your mindset is that you have a problem with feeding live animals, then a bearded dragon isn't for you. So guys, the next thing I want to talk about is keeping a bearded dragon's enclosure clean. The husbandry side of reptile keeping. Now, I've done videos in the past with schedules and routines of how we clean here at Cookie's Critters. Now, just in a nutshell, there are daily cleaning, there is weekly cleaning, monthly, 3 monthly, 6 monthly, and 12 monthly cleaning schedules. Now, the core essence of this is removing poo, so removing waste, cleaning up uneaten food, and general disinfecting. We need to keep this environment clean, otherwise parasites, bacteria, infections, viruses, all these things are going to become quite prevalent in your bearded dragon. Therefore, it's going to increase your medical care, your medical costs, and shorten your bearded dragon's life expectancy. So guys, obviously you're handling feces with a bearded dragon, you're cleaning their enclosures. Yes, you can wear gloves. If you've got a problem with the smell, because bearded dragon poo does stink, yes, you can probably block your nose, wear earmuffs, wear goggles, whatever, wear full PPE, whatever you need to do, but it needs to be done. You've now brought home a pet, you need to commit to the daily requirements of keeping this animal's environment clean. And if you can't do that, then once again, owning a bearded dragon isn't for you. So I suppose the last thing that I wanted to cover off on in this video was a bit of self-education. It is important, no matter what animal you keep, whether it's a cat, a dog, a reptile, a goldfish, regardless of what animal you have, I personally believe it's important that you continuously develop your knowledge and to become a better keeper. Just buying an animal, setting it up, and just doing what you were told to do 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, not growing, not evolving, isn't being a good keeper. Now, some practices have changed, and obviously things change for a reason. We improve the way that we look after our animals. And if you're not going to have that attitude to constantly develop and better yourself and become a better keeper, then having a bearded dragon isn't going to be for you. Now guys, we're at the end of the video. We have covered off on a lot. If at this point you can say, yeah, I can live with a dragon for 15 years, I can manage its health costs, I can manage its feeding costs, I can manage the fact that I'm going to have to pick up bugs and handle bugs and possibly clean out their breeding tubs, all those kind of things. If you can manage and be patient with a bearded dragon, teach them and make them feel secure and safe. If at this point all these boxes you can tick and say that I can do these things, then a bearded dragon is actually a great pet for you. Now, once again, I reiterate a comment that I made at the start of this video. Bearded dragons are the most popular kept reptile throughout the world. Now, yes, they are an Australian species, but they are found worldwide through the breeding and trading overseas. And this little guy has been the perfect example why bearded dragons are great pets. Now guys, if you did enjoy the video, please do hit that like button. If you do have any comments, please do drop them below. If you've got points that maybe I missed that need to be raised and addressed for a future video, please do leave them in the comments below. If you think maybe I've been a little bit unfair or a bit too harsh, once again, guys, leave your criticism in your comments down below. Guys, if you found the video good, if you found it informative and helpful, make sure hit that like button. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel and turn on those post notifications. And guys, as always, if you've got them, keep your beard treated and your beardies heated.